So I'm sitting here today with Anja. Could you please introduce yourself? What is your background, and how did you end up with Roco?
Yeah, so I graduated from my bachelor in business administration last year. I was writing my bachelor thesis on artificial intelligence in fintech, so that's how I got a bit more into the tech sphere. I then started as a product manager in that fintech, and then I started my master data-driven design at the Hogeschool Utrecht, and that's where I met my co-founders, Drew and Leith, and we started Roco.
So Anja, thank you for taking your time of your busy schedule of building Roco. So could you please explain a bit more what Roco is and why the world is waiting for Roco?
Yeah, so Roco is a social platform for saving and storing personal recommendations that people send from one friend to the other, and keeping track of its consumption, and then, getting and giving feedback on it. So, first maybe how did we even come up with that idea? Yes. We found out that people really struggle with choice overload in common recommender systems. So a common recommender system would be, for example, Netflix. A lot of people that we interviewed described that, when they open up Netflix, they're just looking through the dashboard, looking through all the recommendations that they got sent to them by their algorithm, and they just cannot seem to find anything that's worth watching for them. So actually over 90% of people we interviewed said that they struggle with choice paralysis there. Roco takes the approach to send personal recommendations. So we went to that approach because we found out that people aren't really satisfied with algorithmic recommendations because, sometimes they're asking, okay, why does this specific item get recommended to me and not another one? But they're very happy with recommendations they got from their friends, as they have a personal relationship with them, and a lot of people said, my friends just know me better than an algorithm on an app.
Wow, and how does Roco look? So what are the functionalities that sort of support this social recommendations, basically, you're explaining, right? So how does Roco look in that sense?
So Roco, first and foremost, on the main screen, you have your feed on which you get all the recommendations that your friends sent you. So, for example, I want to recommend a movie to my friend Drew, so I sent him a movie, I sent him an album of some music that I liked, and then he receives that in his feed, and he can just scroll through all the different recommendations that he got. He can then filter them by the media type, or let's say the type of attention he can pay to his screen. So we kind of, structured that by the attention span users can pay to the screen, which means does the user have enough attention to look at the screen and watch a video? Can the user read something? Or are they maybe on a bike and they can only listen to a podcast or some music?
All right, so it's really context dependent. So are you basically building one recommendation system to rule them all, right? Like a super recommender?
I would describe it as a recommender system on top of other recommender systems, and then taking the personal relationships of people and users into account. Because for a lot of recommender systems that are out there, you don't have that functionality that you can just send a recommendation on that platform to another person.
What would your contribution be to the startup?
Roco is mainly concerned with peer-to-peer recommendations, so that means personal recommendations from one user to the other. But still, you need an algorithm to determine which recommendations will be upfront or which will be shown first in the dashboard or in the newsfeed.
Right. For this mission, we're also very interested in how interfacing of these algorithms work, right? The algorithmic affordances. So how does Roco and its interface empower users? Because you're basically trying to give them more control over the feeds, right? So what kind of design options did you make, for instance?
So there's two main components to that. The first one would be that the user can choose the type of content by the attention span or by the media type that they want to consume. So how much attention can they pay to the screen? Do they want to watch something, play a game, go to an event, read something? So they can choose what type of content they want to consume in that specific moment. And the second point would be the explainable recommender system. So a lot of people are asking themselves, well, how did this recommendation from an algorithmic recommender system come about? Why does the system recommend the specific movie or the specific video or music to me? So we want to solve that by letting the user tell their friends why they recommended a certain item to them. And well, in the future, we are currently working on developing our own AI. So taking that user data and the explanations why users recommend items to each other, and well, using that data to train our own NLP models to explain how our own AI-generated recommendations could be explained to the user and why they're getting recommended.
All right, so a lot of frustration with the users, and Roco could solve this by giving them the features to select and sift through the data, and later you can even learn more. So it's basically, explains everything to the user. What are your future directions with Roco? So you already mentioned creating an own AI. So when can we install it, or when can we see it?
Hopefully soon. So we've been working on Roco for about 6 months now. We started out with an Excel sheet. So my friends and I, we had our first meetup, a first conversation, which lasted for 5 hours. And there was so many recommendations that we gave to each other, but only verbally. So what we did after that is we came up with an Excel sheet where we just noted down, this is the recommendation I have for you, and this is the person I'm going to send it to. And we then gave feedback in that Excel sheet. So very soon we realized the Excel sheet is not the nicest to look at and not the nicest to use, but there is a need for saving and storing your recommendations somewhere to then consume them later. So what we did is first we went out into the wild and did some user research, some interviews with other people, and asked them, well, what is your problem with personal recommendations? Because we found out that about 80% of people recommend items on at least a weekly basis, if not even daily, but only 20% of them write them down. Yep. So that means that a lot of recommendations, a lot of personal recommendations disappear somewhere in a chat messenger or in their notes app where they didn't even write down, okay, who recommended that to me, when, is it a movie, where is it available? All those kinds of things just get lost and never get used. So that's where we started. So we tried to make that a bit more user-friendly, a bit nicer to look at, a bit nicer to use, and open up then the recommendations. So the next step, the next iteration we did was putting all of that into a third-party platform. We built our current prototype on Notion, which just tests our basic assumptions and hypothesis of, is this going to work and is this a product that users want to use? Yeah. So also right now, we're constantly in development. We already got some feedback from the current prototype, and we're now trying to develop our app, actually, where it gets a bit easier for users to send recommendations, because that's one of the main pain points that we have with our current prototype, that it's very hard for the user to send a recommendation, while before that wasn't really a problem for them.
Wow, so it really solves that frustration of finding that one link in all these WhatsApp chats, right, which you did not note down. So the user feedback, anything that sort of popped up out of it, saying, well, this is the missing piece of my life, finally making, or is there anything, remarkable from their feedback?
We got a lot of good feedback so far. We've been talking to people for the last 6 months, so there was a lot of feedback coming in. A lot of the feedback was easily implementable and, really straightforward. So some of the things we implemented the same day, just to see and test if that's working.
All right, but people are enthusiastic, right? So that's good. Is Roco going to be then a website or a browser plugin or a downloadable app? How can we use Roco in the future?
Most probably, it's going to be an app for your phone, as a lot of people use their phone anyways for recommendations to send to their friends over Messenger. So I would say most probably an app for your phone, but also that is still in development.
And what are the biggest challenges now of creating an interface for Roco?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is, first of all, coming up with an interface. There's so many details that we need to take into account as we're creating that platform from scratch. There's so many directions to go into that it's sometimes hard to find the most important one. We're really trying to think of, okay, what is the most important thing that solves our users' needs, and then to build that first, because it's easy to get distracted with all the fancy features to build on an app without keeping in mind what is needed to solve the user's problem.
Well, I love that idea that the user is center and the algorithm is second, right? So the user is first, the algorithm is second. So that's very good. So this is also where I'm going to plug our product now. And this will be probably, where, you see the website. We have a nice pattern library that helps, you create very algorithmic affordances for design options.
We're actually also using that.
You have heard about the algorithmic affordances design pattern library, right? So how are you using that one?
So right now we're looking into how we can use those algorithmic affordances and how we can implement them in our design in the app. So what we're looking into is how can we give the user more control of the recommendations they receive? How can they maybe tell the algorithm, okay, this is something that really interests me, this is something that doesn't interest me that much. We're also taking the personal feedback that people give to each other into account, as we know, like a lot of recommender systems, algorithmic recommender systems struggle with getting user feedback because maybe a lot of people have watched this one movie, but only 20% gave feedback on it. So what we hope that's going to happen is that people are more inclined to give feedback to their friends instead of an algorithmic recommender system. So first of all, we hope to get more feedback here to train our algorithm or let the user decide what kind of recommendations they want to receive next.
All right, thank you. Anything else we need to know about Roco?
Lots, probably.
Which I forgot to ask. Yeah, what was the quick win of the user feedback? Or the low-hanging fruit, as we would call it?
The low-hanging fruit. So right when we started with our MVP and before we even published it to a bigger user audience, we had internal tests running with internal test users. There was one user that said, well, it's super nice that I can filter by what can I view, what can I read, what can I listen to, but I would rather like to see who my best friends are, for example. So who of my friends recommended me the most items. So that was something that we implemented in 5 minutes, right on the spot.
All right, cool. Roco is also quite an international team. What kind of nationalities work at Roco so far?
So currently we are a mix out of German, Australian, Indonesian, Jordanian, and Dutch teammates. A very diverse team. We all come from different backgrounds. We're all in a different age and we all come from different places in the world, so to say. But I think that really, that diversification of the team really makes the team so strong.
And all the diversification will also be reflected, I guess, then in Roco itself as an app.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.